I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Book and our entire interview with Shannon Forrest, drummer for Toto. Also in this clip, and by the way, this interview was an hour and a half, so we cut it into two. Part two will be coming up tomorrow. The first half, we talked to Shannon and his songwriting and musical partner, Judson McKinny. The new band is called Judson, McKinny, and the Wanderers, and Shannon Forrest is a big part of this. They write all the stuff together. So in the first half of this interview and part two, we're going to have Shannon Forrest talking about Toto, and in the second half, one of the most exciting new groups. They've been working on this for 3 years, Judson, McKinny, and the Wanderers. Guttural, primal. It's the Stones meets glam, meets grabbing you by the freaking jugular. There'll be links in the description where you can hear them. First of all, Shannon Forrest, a longtime drummer in Nashville, long before the Toto days. He's worked with everyone you can imagine in that music scene, including an interesting story he shares in this series on working with Taylor Swift and giving her a piece of advice that she has never forgotten. Plus, he has views on her career and where it's been. We talk about the Dukes of September, Shannon Forrest working with Boz Scaggs, Michael McDonald, and Donald Fagen. And he breaks down some of the drumming parts in some very famous Steely Dan songs. He gives his opinion, a raw opinion of who Luke is, Steve Lukather. And it's very interesting how he talks about Jeff Porcaro. This is a way of talking about Jeff that I have never heard anyone else do before. It's just coming at Jeff Porcaro from a different angle. We talk about that and a lot more. Judson McKinny, Shannon Forrest for Shannon, a Rock History Book. And you know, Toto fans, they're the best.
They are. They truly are, man. And what's remarkable about that, I mean, I can just say this, not to leave everyone else out of the conversation. I'm not saying that one thing isn't and one thing is another, but the thing that I love about those guys is that because they're such authentic musicians in their own individuality, I just feel like of the places I've been, those guys hit the stage with something to prove every night. Yep. Not just playing the songs in an appreciative way for the loving, adoring fans. Now they're still playing it like life depends on it. You know what I mean? Like and that's, that's why I say really for me to divide myself in any particular way. That's the only scenario that I would have said yes to. Like when Luke called me, the day that he called me about coming back was literally the same day I was having our biggest executive meeting with this project. You know what I mean? So in comes seemingly conflicting agendas. You know what I mean? But then the more I thought about it, I thought, no, I think these are reciprocal.
The last time I was in LA was in 92.
Yeah.
It was that day in 92.
Really?
When we lost Jeff. And I remember going, it's not why I haven't been back. I've just raised another family. But, you look you up in Wiki, biographies will always say, Jeff Porcaro, how important was he to you? The obvious question.
Well, I mean, I can get really deep for your folks here because, there's in one regard, when a musician is associated to another musician with a particular amount of direct contact, it's kind of held in poor regard. You know what I mean? Like typically, it's like, man, who are you? You know what I mean? The attitude, and that should be, that's rightfully so. But what Jeff is for me, and this is deep, right? Because and I understand this now, just because of the years of searching and things that we do. Any musician that we're all inspired by things we hear, and then the first thing we do is we try to emulate. That's real important to us. I in my personal, and not to get heavy, but this is important because this is why it's more than the typical influence that the sound of someone's playing has on somebody. I had not like a disfiguring type traumatic thing when I was 4 years old in my development, nothing molestation or anything like this. Something that's more psychological, that, through my life and development that you figure out how to deal with these things and sort them out. And so for me, the thing, I grew up in a musical family. My dad's a wonderful musician. I grew up in the studio with him. Truly, in all the people I've worked with, he literally is on the level with all of them. Even though he was in a smaller sphere and whatever, I was so fortunate to have him for a father. And I got to crawl around studios before I could walk. You know what I mean? Even though it was in South Carolina and outside the typical, the people that I was in, one of the drummer that I sat in the corner of a drum booth, 4 years old, watching this guy named Buster Phillips play, who is still one of the, and it's not because of my affinity for my childhood. Like, I have recordings. This guy was so into Steve Gadd then, and in South Carolina, he's like one of the best groove drummers I've ever heard. So I got to sit in that corner, when every kid wants to play drums, give me my pots and pans or whatever, and I'm sitting in the studio, and osmosis is giving me that, you know what I mean? Right. And then on the radio, the earliest things that stuck out to me happened to come back around to Jeff Porcaro over and over. So as a kid experiencing the radio, and I'm locking into things, not knowing names, you know what I mean, but songs, you know what I mean, the ones that I wanted to hear, and my dad would point things out to me when I was very young. But what it comes down to, I had an impactful thing that can really affect a person's confidence, right? Like it kind of changes the way you develop and assimilate around people. Well, the biggest thing I get from Jeff Porcaro, and the only question I ever asked anybody inside the band about him, I never asked him, what'd you guys do this day? Or when you were doing this, right? I never brought the subject up. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, Sklar wanted me to do an interview several times about it, and I just wasn't comfortable. You know what I mean? I didn't quite know what to say. You know what I mean? Wanted me to address Jeff in a particular way, and I didn't quite have the right words. You know what I mean? I could talk about a drummer. There's 1,000 guys that talked about him as a drummer. It's different than that for me. And how can I say that? So it comes down to this. I asked Steve Porcaro. The only thing I asked him ever. And it was just kind of passive. We were the last two guys getting off the bus one day, We're in the back lounge. I said, man, where did Jeff get his confidence? Confidence, right? Because that's what I hear. You know what I mean? That's what I feel when I feel that guy play, is a particular kind of confidence. And he turns around and said, right, he got that and I got anxiety, you know what I mean? And just walked off the bus. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, exactly, man. That dude had confidence like that from the time he could walk, And when you think about, and I know you understand this from your history of rock, rock and roll, how relevant and being a drummer, how still contemporary he is mentioned and regarded like he's still here regularly. He still shows up in print media. He's not gone anywhere. And it really isn't, I guess what I look at it too is he never had the self-doubt to deviate from his voice of playing in whatever situation he was cast in, and whatever he never felt like, oh, this is a song that sounds like something Steve Gadd would play. I need to do my Steve Gadd version of Jeff Porcaro. You know what I mean? Like, he never left Jeff Porcaro. And it's like, hey, look, my feel is what I've got. You know what I mean? And my interpretation of the arrangement of the tune is what I've got. And so that comes from the confidence of never second guessing a choice, about yourself. Right. And so that's why he's important to me, is like, I'm still chasing, those demons and trying to figure out, how I can just get that noise out of my mind and be that confident in my skin. You know what I mean? And then if I can do that, then as a player, it follows suit. You know what I mean? But that is the essence of what, it isn't in the notes and it isn't in the whatever. You can hear that thing in every note he ever played. You know what I mean? And that's what's different about him. Like I know the things that technically send drummers off their mark, even if it's minuscule moments of I'm in it, and then I thought about this, and I'm out for 1/8 note, you know what I mean? And nobody notices that, but you know where that lives, you know what I mean? And Jeff's remarkable because you can't find that. You can't find a correction like the time moved this way. And now, I'm accountable to the metronome or to whatever's happening, and I have to make a correction. So all of a sudden there's this ugly bump in the time, you know what I mean, of something, right? That's beyond drumming. Like, you have to be so confident in what you have to give that you won't deviate from that, you know? And that, again, that's why Jeff is still so deeply relevant to me. And I think in most people that still admire him and speak of him in a certain way, that's what they're experiencing too. They just think it's the drums, you know what I mean? They just think it's the drums, but what he's giving you is a representation of self-confidence, you know?
I have never, ever heard it put that way before. You just blew my freaking mind.
I've thought about it a little bit, you know what I mean?
Holy snapping turtles. Yes, I said snapping turtles.
Yeah.
Bernie Charavelli.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I became friends with him a few days ago. One thing, I need Spotify as a broadcaster because I have to look up a lot of stuff. So one day, Spotify said, why don't you listen to this guy? I'm listening to him and said, I know his name. I didn't know anything about Michael McDonald. I didn't know anything. I'm listening to his solo stuff and I'm freaking blown away. I'm going, where's this guy been my whole life? My God, his solo stuff is amazing. So I reached out to him. He hasn't got back to me yet, but I said, Bernie, we're talking. We're going to do an interview. Because that's another guy. That's another guy where I'm going, it's my job. If someone jiggles me inside, it's my job to make sure I can at least make as many people know about it as I possibly can. Because, you know, it's my anyway, he's
that's right.
Dukes of September.
Yeah.
What was that experience? Is that, I mean, I'm not going to say intimidating because, I mean, if you're a little intimidated, that's good for you. It's like a little nervous. And I know your history. I know how far back you go. But what was that like?
Revelatory and validating, but not in the way that most people would think. You know, I grew up where I came from, small town, with a really brilliant father as a musician. And then I came into a community that, from a standpoint of industrial kind of, you know, breadth, you know, Nashville, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's a professional music city. I was like, I couldn't wait to get outside my dad's, you know, out from under his wing, but not because I just wanted to experience more, not because I thought he was less. I knew what it was. I kept going places and going, well, man, you know, this music may be genre different, but the people I'm working with are not as hip as my dad. You know what I mean? Like, that isn't that father-son thing. It was just truth, you know? And so I was stuck in this place where I was just about to lose my sanity because I'm constantly working in an environment where, I'm going, this can't be how the records I love were made. You know, I'm constantly looking around the room and just looking at the actual structure and scheduling and the timing of how things get done. And I'm going, this just seems like there's something in the way of any kind of potential unexpected moment to happen here, right? So I'll make it quick to get to Fagan. I started working with Mike McDonald, you know. I met him here, but I knew him a couple years. I'd seen all these other people just, you know, really make fools of themselves, you know, trying to do the shuck and jive and you know, crawl up his ass and can't, you know, get him to pay attention. And he knew me for 2 years just as the son-in-law of his friends. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't go there. I wasn't going to abuse that humility and authenticity that he was giving me with, you know, oh man, I play drums, man. Can we hang? I just didn't do that. And we ended up having an amazing relationship. We ended up being partners in the studio for like 8 years together. I learned so much with that time with him, and he's still a dear friend. All right. So just at the edge of sanity, I guess is the point. When I met Mike, it was like, oh, okay, I wasn't wrong. You know what I mean? Like this way of doing things in this industrial mechanism is not the way that the music that I come from, or in bands and the way they do it. That's just not how it's done. So I knew it wasn't, but I was just about kind of losing my sanity because I was always running into people going, no, this way, and I'm going, it can't be, And so when Donald Fagen, Dukes of September was like, the first thing I could say in a different way, because the Toto guys have as gigantic of ears as you're ever going to run into. You know what I mean? Donald, and maybe it was my preconception of all those stories about the Steely Dan session kind of scenarios where it was so scrutinized. It felt like initially like I felt like two gigantic ears were on stage of accountability, like the biggest ears, you know what I mean? Like that at all times that you're playing in the presence of, a guy that can be the most, not analytical, but the most, meticulous and observant of what is happening, But that was never an obstacle. Donald, I'm a little remiss because it was such a short window, an amazing window of time I spent with him that I probably should have invested in differently. I get distracted in certain ways, and I won't divulge kind of how that went, but I put my focus in, quickly put my focus in places that didn't serve me the best, not in an unprofessional way, but, there was maybe it was like a lack of understanding of what was being offered to me. You know what I mean? Like there was a peculiar way that Donald and I interacted, and this is from my vantage point, and maybe from some of what other guys, and there was the same band as Steely Dan. They would point out, hey, I've never seen him quite do that before. I didn't realize what a unique extension of his hand that he had made to me a few times, because I didn't know what I was looking at. And this doesn't really even have to do with the musical side of things, like he was giving me the opportunity to come into his world in a way that I didn't quite interpret, in a way that I wish I would have understood more at the time, because I would have made more of that relationship. Not that we didn't have a great relationship. I just didn't realize sometimes what a unique personal side of himself he was giving me access to. You know what I mean? I was just a little bit, because I didn't know him well enough to know that was unusual, from those guys. But as far as the musical side of things goes, there's some interesting things that I can kind of lay on people. He would say, light and tight, keep it light and tight, right? And this is not what would he say? It's not a critique. It's just an understanding. When we come into situations, and I learned my way around this, even back to Toto here in a minute, it's what I would perceive the artist might want about music from my vantage point as someone who's experienced that music, same as you. I'm thinking Bernard Purdie, right? I'm thinking Jeff Porcaro. I'm thinking Steve Gadd. I'm thinking Jim Keltner, all these different voices that are on those records. And then I'm hearing light and tight. Keep it light and tight. Now, their music never gets spread out. It is always tight. You know what I mean? But those guys that played were not playing with a light touch. You know what I mean? And so you start decoding what this is, and you're going, Donald, that New York jazz thing. Now that's light and tight. Do you know what I mean? That I can understand. On the front side of things, never like kind of bullish with the way that you're muscling the songs around. You know what I mean? Keep it up on its toes, A to B. He hit me one time on, we were playing, Pretzel Logic, right? What's the 12/8 song? The blues. Ba 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 da 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 ba 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 ba. That's
not Peg. You're not talking Peg. Oh!
But
Oh,
that,
shit.
I humiliate myself trying to sing. I typically don't do that. Anyway, that song's a 12/8 blues. You know what I mean? Basically, and it goes ba 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 ba. So we're playing that turnaround one time, okay, and I'm thinking blues, and I'm playing it, and we make that turn. And for me, from the blues, every time you turn the phrase, it kind of lays back. You know what I mean? And he stopped us one day and goes, "Hey, Shannon, when we come out of the turnaround and when we hit back to letter A, don't lay that back." He said that it was that way on the record, and I hate that. You know what I mean? So that light and tight thing. Just, I learned so much in the understanding that artists perceive their music one way, and the fan and the observer can sometimes perceive it another. You know what I mean? And that he was so savvy that, say, on those funky feeling tracks of Bernard Purdie, like Kid Charlemagne and things like that, he must have had this understanding that for all the ways that that he liked one presentation of something. He knew the value of, like, well, I'm not getting exactly what I want my way, but what I am getting out of these guys today is what it needs to be. You know what I mean? Like, not fighting so hard against the grain for that light and tight thing that it was alienating the funky thing he was getting in a particular moment. But when you get out there and start playing this stuff on the road and you're playing these songs live, he wants them to feel a certain way. And a lot of these guys would say, "Don't worry about the record. We don't have to play it don't worry about playing it like the record." Whereas I've found things to be difficult. Certain drummers are harder to deviate from than others. When I'm sitting in that chair and playing a song, and a case in point is Rick Marotta on Peg. That thing, it's got right. Well, Rick Marotta is playing boom, ba, boom, ba, so he's playing this. There's a hole in the middle of the bar where the whole rest of the band are playing dotted eights, ba, ba, and he's going ba, He's answering that with the bass drum, and so to play that groove and play the same rhythm that the piano was playing is compositionally, to me, it changes the song so significantly, it doesn't feel like Peg anymore. You know what I mean? Like, harmonically, it sounds like Peg, but it no longer feels like Peg. You know what I mean? And so, those things, Jeff is that way. It's really hard to deviate from a track that he would play. Those tracks with, Hey 19, when we would play Hey 19, he would definitely say light and tight on Hey 19. Don't, keep that thing on its toes. I would always feel like I was playing ahead, you know what I mean? Like I was having to lean forward, you know what I mean? To keep those things where he wanted them. That song was kind of done in a certain way that it was, I felt good about just playing the way I play on that. But when I'm playing Peg, I'm thinking, man, I have to give my best attempt at making that Rick Marotta's composition of drums on that track is like Hall of Fame level. Like if you can get one of those in your career, you know what I mean? You should be like enshrined, you know what I mean? And he did. I mean, he's got so many great tracks he played on, but that one's like, I used to think it was Bernard Purdie, because it kind of has a Bernard thing about it, you know what I mean? But then you go, no, man, that's Rick, and it's amazing. So yeah, with Donald, it was an amazing time. I can't believe it's 12 years. I can't like, you know what I mean? Like that amount of time. We stayed in contact for a while. I should try to reach out to him. People changed their emails, a lot. And so maybe the last time I reached him and thought I was ghosted, it might have been a different email, They
have to. They have no choice. By the way, Steve Gadd, I asked Steve Gadd, I said, well, years ago, I completely ruined an interview with Steve Gadd because I was doing smooth jazz at the time, radio. And I talked to him about the Gaddabouts with Edie. I kind of missed an opportunity to really talk to Steve Gadd about Steve Gadd. I said, well, what do people ask you about the most? Cliche question. He says, 50 ways. I said, what do the drummers ask you about the most? He says, well, that the drumming in Asia. He says, of course, the drummers asked me about that the most. And I went, yeah. By the way, are you guys going to record anything with Toto on the road? You know?
I know that's a question, and I couldn't even begin to tell you because Toto is so unique in the way they do things, man. People would think, okay, well, there's a change in the band. Now, of course, I was there for 6 years, so it's not like I'm coming in cold, you know. But we rehearsed 4 days to get ready on this thing, you know, like that's it, you know. Phil Gaines amazingly he had 2 days notice before rehearsals to come into rehearsals and only have 4 days. And the fourth day of that rehearsal, we cut off early because Greg ended up winning an Emmy that night, and he had to split for the Emmys. So basically, Toto rehearsal looked like we ran half the tunes the first day. Greg is fucking incredible. Never seen anything like it. He has photographic memory and perfect pitch. So the hardest tune that we had added to the set, or most complex arrangement anyway, you know, was the first thing we ran down. And he's got an iPhone. Okay, hey man, give me 5 minutes, you know, like, and he's listening to his iPhone, and like people take for granted, it's like he's not just nailing the transitional moves and the arpeggiating things that stick out. He's nailing the exact voicing that Page has internally. And Dave does, he's a very unique guy in how he moves chords with minimal movement. You know what I mean? That's kind of part of his feeling. It's like he plays the changes inside the pinky and thumb a lot. So just to know that Greg is just immediately like, nah, nah, nah. And then 5 minutes later, we play the hardest tune that's been added perfectly. You know what I mean? You know, and I can see Luke, you know, he's stressing out about kind of where we are because these last minute changes are happening, and are we going to be able to do? And I can see that stress just kind of melt, you know what I mean? Because like, oh, we just played the hardest thing we had to learn, you know, in 15 minutes. So, okay, all right. So my point is, we ran half the songs the first day, half of them the second day. We played the set twice the third day, but like full pads, you know what I mean? Like straight through twice, and then one time, and that's ready for a tour. You know what I mean? It's what I love about those guys and that experience is that. But to your question, we had so little time, there was no discussion of anything, you know, kind of beyond that, you know. Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Hi, guys.
Well, we're always, man, just so you know, going in, Judson, we'll talk about this. What I've done here, what we've done together early on, we've run a YouTube channel that live streamed everything we do. Writing, I mean, the entire process of all the music we've been making, we put up live. You can sit in the room while we're doing it. Now, we don't always engage what that is, but that the nature of employing YouTube as the kind of, there's never been easier to have your own television show. You just have to have something worth people's time, right? I was solving all these problems from a standpoint of studio and remote recording using things like Source Connect, which is like a real high-end 1080 full audio video bandwidth, you know, to be able to do remote sessions, you know. So I was really tapping into making this place video ready at a high resolution way back there, you know.
So Shannon, this is your, what am I looking at?
We're in my studio, in my control room. Yeah.
Let's start with the obvious thing. How did you guys meet? You go back a long way or what?
Well, basically, when I moved to Nashville, I got hooked up with a man named John McBride, who you know from Blackbird Studio. And I was doing many sessions with his academy. He has an academy where he trains engineers, to be the next wave of engineers. And so I think, had done 4 sessions, and I really liked the album I had. I had Jack White's bass player, really cool drummer from East Nashville. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do something with this. So I got in touch with the guy who represents Dave Cobb. I thought, well, maybe I'll get Dave Cobb to mix this and maybe it'll lead to somewhere. Turns out Brightman, who manages Dave Cobb, said, Dave's busy. How about Mark Needham? So I started looking into Mark Needham. It's like, whoa, this guy's huge, man. He did like Imagine Dragons and all these different things. Did this record, really liked the sound of it, and then got at the end of it. And I said, I like what we did here. I'm not sure about the drums. And he goes, well, I got a guy you might want to talk to, a guy named Shannon Forrest, and he's got a studio. So I called Shannon and I said, hey, man, I got this session at John McBride's place.
Yeah.
He sees the number, which is a South Carolina number, and come to find out, he's from 20 minutes from where I grew up in this podunk town, Easley, South Carolina, that nobody's heard of.
That's right. That's right. Nobody's from there. So yeah, when I saw that number, I mean, there's so many things that were just interesting about the way our paths kind of led to the point we find ourselves now. But
and you blew off like some big work to do that session. I mean,
what I did blow off was in the middle of and this has been a theme for me, a recurring theme. I blew off a lot more money to meet this guy. You know what I mean? And it was at a time where nobody was working, so you needed work. I mean, he paid me, but I had something else that was several days of work that I turned down just to see what this was. You know what I mean? And so
yeah, we got in there on Studio A, and pretty much from the downbeat, there was just something there.
Well, I can tell you what's remarkable about him. What struck me first is, you know, I've done so many sessions, right? The process of how we get used to working can be a bit like, you know, watch the clock, and there's, you know, what time is lunch, and, you know, all these different things. And just as a performer across the room, so he wanted to record all in the room, which is a bold thing to do because you can't fix anything. It requires performance, you know? And I'm just meeting this guy, and he's, you know, about 20 feet across the room from me, playing guitar and singing at the same time, you know? And we would play some of these tunes, which for some people sounds like torture, you know. He might do 13 performances of this track as we're just getting to know each other. What blew me away about it was how committed and how charismatic, and he was performing in that room like there were 20,000 people watching every time he played anything. You know what I mean? So that's what started the relationship. I mean, I know what that's worth. You know what I mean? Like in all my travels and all the people there's a remarkable few people that have that component to what they do. You know what I mean? So that was like kind of a first signal, like, okay, what's this guy about? You know? And again, to go back to the listeners here checking this out, what's cool about the rock history component of this thing, Mark Needham goes back to the Bay Area with James Brown in the early 70s. You know what I mean? Mark's been around the block, worked for everybody you can think of. Wicked Game for Chris Isaac was his production. You know what I mean? And Mark and I are pals. And Mark goes, hey, you know, he sent me his way, you know, Judson, he sent Judson my way. And we had this conversation about, well, it was kind of like, I've been working with this guy. Jump in there and do some recon. What's this guy about? You know what I mean? And so then it just, when I met him and saw what he was, I just wanted to help him, right? And I had basically taken a step back from producing and things. I'd made a Mike McDonald record that some of the listeners might have been, you know, aware of, Mike's last solo record, and I just kind of hit a wall with it where essentially, if the artist doesn't want it as bad as I do, there's nothing I can do for them. You know what I mean? And it's going to wreck my outcome. I never got into the production chair just to be able to punch the clock on a daily as a producer. I want a result. I want to offer something up to music that's going to reach people and have an impact, you know? And that was basically off my radar. And when I met him, I thought, well, this guy deserves help. You know what I mean? And so the first thing I did was what I thought was the most exciting tune we did. I said, bring that out to my studio and I'll do a mix for you for free, you know?
And I'd never heard my music sound like what this guy was doing, like with his drums. Like, I mean, I guess I always had the hope, you know, that one day it'll click, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when we did this song called Hello Nashville Yoga Pants, and it was this sort of Johnny B. Good, Dylan-esque, like social commentary on just the shit going on.
Yeah.
And like when Shannon, like he just came in like some kung fu fighter on the thing. And I was like, whoa, that's a Banty Rooster right there. Right. I was like, we got to work together.
And for your, again, for the folks checking it out, I mean, you know, from the muso side of the thing, like Judson's rhythm, his right hand and my right hand, they definitely have the same earth and DNA, and that has something to do with where we're both from. You know what I mean? There's a certain feel. I kind of look at it in the context of what we'll get into later with Toto. There's certain things where, you want to be able to bring in some of the things that influence you into your own playing. And for better or worse, the one thing that I cannot get away from is that my version of the things that I try to play on the drums feel like my Southern boy version of them. No matter, I can play the exact same notes, but there's a feeling, and it's a good thing. You know what I mean? But it's like it's something kindred to the two of us, and I'll put it in perspective. When I first met, and I had so many people tell me something to this effect. The first day of rehearsals with Toto, when Lenny Castro came back in the band, we played the first bit of tunes around, and Lenny and I just getting to know each other. And he said to me, he goes, "Oh man, feels like being in a big old comfy chair." You know what I mean? And I always hate that. You know what I'm saying? Because I know what that means. Like I want to be up on the front, feeling, like up on my toes and kicking your ass a little bit. You know what I mean? Hard as I may try, it's just Southern comfort. On some level, that's what he's identifying, that laid back Southern thing. I want to have that West Coast on his tiptoes kind of snappy thing. And, I can articulate those songs the right way, but the closest I can get to wanting to do that always has that kind of feel to it. It's just who I am. And that's who this guy is. You know what I mean? So we have a definite synergy that way from day one,
There's something about it's strange. I have my wife Shannon who's usually in the background. I do all my research on my iPhone, and I'll play who I'm going to interview. And it does. She's in the kitchen. We both work out of the house, and I'll put something on in the background this morning. And I usually listen and research at the last minute. That's what I do. So I got my heater here.
Same.
And I want it fresh. I mean, my notes are here. That's why I'm looking over here. But so I put on "Miss You" right off the bat. She says
come on.
That album, Some Girls, is like the biggest Rolling Stone album, and everyone expects all the other ones from the 60s to be. But anyway, your version, reinventing is such a, but when I'm listening to this album, she keeps saying, "What is that?" And then Becca Bell, I was slightly familiar with that story, and that character. But there's an immediacy to, and I look at my own career like that. When I'm focused and I'm present and I'm putting everything I want into something, for whatever reason, it resonates. I hate to sound old new agey, but there's something extra snappy and present and in your face. I mean, I heard Jagger, I heard Iggy Pop, I heard so many great singers that I love that grabbed me by the jugular. Did that just happen with the chemistry? I mean,
well, that's, again, back to my production sort of journey. Some people produce as a vocation, a daily job, and they don't mind the 90% fail rate. They're just, they're just hourly working. I'm not that. I don't, because if I apply my best work to something and it never gets heard because the artist wasn't compelling enough, I can't outrun the artist. And that's just emotionally, I've never been able to separate myself from the emotional impact of what you're talking about, like what you experience when you hear him. I was like, okay, when you can do that thing and it's that compelling, let's figure out where we can go with this. That's what he showed me in the room. You know what I mean? That first day, that thing that you're talking about. Now, that thing about "Miss You," and I'll let him jump in here. We did that on a lark. There was no prep right to that. Okay. We didn't even run the song down together. And again, I don't jump in there lightly on doing covers. I think it can be a major fail. But I knew that this guy can actually get in there and go toe to toe with a track like that. You know what I mean? And I think our version stands off. It's the right recognizable homage to the thing, but it definitely has its own gear to it, which is the Judson McKinny JMW, our brand of energy. You know what I mean? And I appreciate you picked up on that. But also one other thing the reason we did that is a completely live take. So that video, we had cameras in the room. That is a live take. That's the second time we played it with the band in the room. All that shit is live. He and I layered in a little bit more of the background, stuff that's on the record, the oohs and stuff. You know what I mean? But part of the thing about that was to go, look, you want to book this band and dig what this guy's about? Here, this is live. You know what I mean? That is live, unadulterated truth, you know?
Yeah. You want to add to that?
You know, no frills, you know, it's like, well, what can you do in the room? What can you do in front of an audience? You know, Shannon had me out doing recon downtown on Broadway, man. He said, go into a hostile environment, you know, and win the crowd. So I was slam banging at Tootsie's around that time. In fact, that gal that's in there, we pulled her from the Broadway circuit at the last minute. The lady who's kind of chiming in. I mean, that was just done on the fly, just picking out of Nashville.
We had no time. I mean, like that thing was contingent on having a background singer there. And we have a girl named Jackie Wilson that sings with us and on these records. She's on that track, Liberty Bells, quite a lot. You can hear her in that track if you hear that one. But
what I learned, you know, when Shannon had me doing that recon, because we were in the studio every day, and then, you know, either a portion of the day I was downtown or at night, you know, on a late night slot. And what I learned is, man, it's got to happen now, and you got to win them now.
It's life or death.
It's like, yeah. So that's what we always say. We say success or death.
Yeah.
I was going to say survival, but survival's in there too. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And just for the rock history side of things, Jagger's the perfect thing. When I met him and I called back Mark Needham, I said, you know, there's a component to him, because there was certain music that I heard that's great. Judson's got a very diverse background and a lot of different stuff. I said, man, there is something about him that is very Mick Jagger in his kinetics and his boldness. And I said, you know, a lot of people that claim, especially industrial people, that like, oh, we love the Stones, we'll do anything to get VIP box. Can we get a picture with Mick Jagger in the background? You know what I mean? Like if an actual Mick Jagger walked in their office, they would have him jettisoned from the building, because it's such a strong personality that they're not welcome. And that's somehow to the death of what I feel like modern rock is. It doesn't have that component. It's just the sound of a genre of music without the necessary engine, which is, you know, someone who has the ability to make you uncomfortable, the willingness to make themselves uncomfortable for your experience. You know what I'm saying? And anything outside of that, I'm not going to apply my work to. Toto gives me the perfect opportunity to be one version of myself in a group of people that can represent that thing. But outside of that, in applying my learning, you know, process and the things that I've done, I'm not applying my musical voice to anything else that is propping up mediocrity. I have a discography of like 1,300 records that's, you know, trying to push along the antithesis of Judson McKinny. So these people checking us out, I appreciate the opportunity so much. Like, I can't tell you all the people that I have had the opportunity to stand toe to toe with. This guy is the first one of those that's not already like a legendary name that I've met in my 30-year career. So that's where we are today. You know, that's why all my energy is here. And then the Toto thing comes in and brings the opportunity to, you know, hip those folks and all those fans to what this is about, you know, while going back out there and you know, participate. I love those guys, man. I mean, you talk about, for me, it's continuity. There's people that I can be in a room with that don't make sense to me, and people that do, you know. And I know you've interviewed Luke, and you know, I mean, these people, I'm comfortable with people like that, even at their strongest representation. You know what I'm saying? Even if I get if I take an elbow to the rib cage sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, I'll take that, because there is an output. There's something we can communicate that lives where I want to live. And that's, I guess, my point. Like, rock and roll is not, it's not affable. You know what I mean? Rock and roll at its very nature is counterculture. It's uncomfortable. It's provocative. It makes you give a second thought to what your assumption was about what somebody just said. You know what I mean? And then you pick those people that say the things that maybe you connect to, and that becomes your rock and roll. You know what I mean? But the struggle that as an industrial kind of guy that wanted to make rock and roll for years, and listening to an industry go, oh, rock and roll's a dead genre. It's like, well, yeah, if you're not if it doesn't allow assholes in the room, it certainly is. You know what I'm saying? Or what people perceive as being an asshole. You know what I mean? Like that, there has to be something uncomfortable and uncomfortably honest and bold about what is being said. And and even in Toto's world, you know, those guys and Lukather, they present their point of view through the way they play in a very strong way. You know what I mean? And it's just, it seems more about the music, but it's still, there's deep personalities and deep, expression of thought and that stuff with those guys,
Through the years when I interview people, and of course, I just turned 64 yesterday. I
Happy birthday.
Thank you. But a lot of the people that I interview, as you can imagine, are at least 10 years on me, right?
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up in the 70s, they were on the radio. And when they release new material, a lot of them still do, as you know. I'll get the question sometimes. They'll go, well, you think I still got it still have an edge, And it's something that's either conscious or unconscious for a lot of these older rockers. I mean, Steve Hackett just released a new album, and it's just, he sounds like he's a 20-year-old playing guitar, and he's like, not because of, it's just, I thought, they all want to be still thunderous, but they all want to grab you by the jugular. There's a thing Shannon, when you were talking, we all remember when we were young and we'd hear something on the radio and we'd literally stop doing what the freaking we're doing, and we'd look at the speakers. On an unconscious level, that's the jugular. That's the kind of something that jiggles you inside. To hate to sound cliche, but that's what this record did for me. Like when I first heard it, I'm hearing Becca Bell, and I'm going, is that the same Becca Bell? And I'm looking it up, and like it's just hits you. Tell me about that song.
Well, I started working on that song a few years ago, and what's funny about it, I actually wrote it on a little keyboard, like the lick. And when Shannon finally heard how I wrote it, he's like, how on earth did that become what we did? But it did. But there's a real Becca Bell that was in my life as a teenager. And I guess she just became a muse in a moment of yearning.
No way.
And another.
Yeah, from Greenwood, South Carolina, Becca Bell. Yep, she still exists, and she's in Columbia now.
And it's an interesting thing.
And very married.
Yeah, right. Well, part of our thing that I think your audience would be interested in, all that music, man. You go back through our live videos, there are videos of us writing, you know what I mean, and performing those parts. Like the actual thing going down is in this vault of archival thing, and that's the nature of the channel. And part of how we're going to present, and to what you were saying earlier about YouTube and the power that is for people, it's like, well, what would you do now? The way the music has been undermined in a certain regard, as far as like there's 3 or 4 other ways to entertain yourself that, honestly, in my point of view, that most people's not putting that, if not everybody can access that thing that can make music feel that compelling. You know what I'm saying? Now, everybody can create music, and I think that's great and a wonderful thing. But part of the way that you have to engage and work around the marginalization of the flood of activity, the flood of participation, is utilizing these same kind of media tools that sort of undercut you to advance you. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, what can we do with this creatively? Well, we can kind of give you, if you want to feel like a fan and feel connected to what we're doing, you take the ride with us. You know what I mean? When I hit with Toto, we're going to be split screening and YouTubing and doing interviews and things from the gig, and I'm going to be constantly engaging that audience, the same as you. You know what I mean? The same as how we understand this thing has to work.
Someone asked me the other day. They said, "Oh, you're going to retire next year." I don't know what it is, and this gets to you guys. I said, "I don't know what it is, but I 40 years in radio, I kind of got I don't know, I'm kind of like what I'm doing now. For the first time, I can actually say I like this, even though it's arduous. I mean, I do Final Cut Pro too, and that was hard for me, going from one software to another and going to Apple. But I say this for a reason. And artists tell me that sometimes. They go, I'm not going to retire. I'm actually having more fun now than I ever have. I'm actually paying attention now because I have to, because my mind's getting a little older. So I'm learning new things, which is good for my mind. But inadvertently, I'm getting into this room of new toys and tricks and things. So Shannon, when you tell me that, uh, I'm such a believer of telling people, learn new things, find your freaking muse, do stuff.
Absolutely.
I'll say it again, this is so primal, and at times, like, it makes me, the Quentin Tarantino thing. Oh my God.
Yes.
The second you said it, I went, yes.
Yeah. 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 Becca Bell feels much like that. Judd's a very well-read fellow, and we referenced Edgar Allan Poe pretty significantly, and how we approached writing Champion of Losers, but it also shows itself very much in Becca Bell and the feeling of that song. I always talk that song. I think about things as a player. I think of things visually, and the chorus of that song feels a bit like Natural Born Killers. I feel like it's a runaway love song with a burning tire coming off the car rolling. You know what I mean? I see things like that, which is very much sort of a Tarantino-esque, feeling, around romance,
But was it? I mean, I know there's a girl, but it was based on a good girl's guide to murder at all. Was it the real Becca Bell, the character?
The character of Becca Bell, for me, I'm not familiar with this work, but so that I'm actually kind of, now you've piqued my interest, because I want to.
We're unaware.
We're unaware
Holly
of that,
Jackson.
and now I want to know about that.
It's written by Holly Jackson.
Okay, now how similar is our Becca Bell to that Becca Bell? Or are they just vastly different, or what?
Well, I used to always think, till I looked it up, I thought Becca Bell was always the protagonist in the movie, but there's actually major characters in it, and Becca Bell had a bad childhood, and her sister was killed. True crime is so big now. I've often thought I'd make a lot more money if I did true crime.
You are nailing it. You are nailing it, man.
This is remarkable. Now we're going to have to check this out.
Okay, you just did one of those things that I'm sick and fucking tired of. You know what I mean? Like, show me the money, goddammit, if we're that in sync with something. You know what I mean? We've been duking this thing out. Let's get the big stage. But one of the new things we wrote, we walked in the room. He goes, true crime's a big thing. So we wrote one that is based on a storytelling thing from that point of view,
which is so it's kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
Well,
Remarkable.
that's weird,
you bring
that true
that
crime. I'm sure. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm sure there's bands that do that. Not that you want to get a thing, but any angle works if it's done with integrity from the person who does it. But Shannon sometimes says to me, my wife, can we watch something that's not true crime tonight? Because she'll want to actually sit down, because she's an A personnel. She never stops. And I'll go, okay, but I think the husband did it in this one, but we'll watch it later. Last Man Standing. You guys are so synchronized when you're playing together. Like, that's the first thing I thought. I'm going, God, there's just like on this, they're like two sides of the same brain. Tell me about that tune.
Well, we were sitting out, and I think we were picking up your boy, right? And like sitting out in the parking lot, and we started coming up with the chorus, I think, for Last Man Standing. And Shannon sometimes would just come to me, and he'll be like, hey man, could you write a song like this? And he had mentioned the phrase last man standing. We talk about Westerns and all kinds of different things. And he said, what about a tune like that? And in that parking lot, it started manifesting. And then we came back and ended up like superimposing it off of something else we'd written, and it just started coming together.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. Back to the thing because if that piques your interest, what I believe is groundbreaking and fearless in what we've done, and Judson's willingness to do it, like the writing session is on camera. You know what I mean? So if you want to go, well, where'd that come from? Well, there is an actual, now it's deep dive. You know what I mean? It's a deep dive, but it exists on the channel. But a very interesting thing about that, and part of the thing that I would just say about how we work, it's hard work. It's not a 3-hour songwriting session and we're done in time for lunch. You know what I mean? We came in early. That's one of the first things we did. and we had referenced the song Wonderwall, right? I don't know if you know that tune, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well, we were looking for movements. Like that song has basically 4 different hooks, and that's what I was trying to get for us. Like, okay, well, if we can get an A with a melodic hook, a B with another payoff, so, you know what I mean?
So that the interest keeps building as the song progresses.
And that was sort of the exercise in Judson and I starting to work together, where I would have kind of had a producer's hat on, because we weren't considering it a co-project yet. You know what I mean? And still, the way we look at it is kind of unorthodox. I'm still here to be like Shannon Forrest presents Judson McKinny. You know what I mean? That's it. But it's definitely a shared everything we write and think about and musically create. There is that chemistry that you're talking about.
And basically what we had done is, in following sort of the idea of Wonderwall, we'd created this sort of British sounding, folky sounding thing that was a tad sleepy, but once we got the idea for Last Man Standing, we're like, oh, I played the same stuff that sounded sleepy a bit on bass, and all of a sudden, it ain't sleepy no more.
Right.
It's you're going in like, down a street of some bad part of London or something, and it's not Wonderwall.
Well, and I'll tell you something really fascinating about this, but it goes back to why I stopped everything I was doing. Once we started working together, I did less and less and less outside work till there was no more outside work, to a part that it was perilous for me. You know what I mean? But it was worth it. I can see, what this can do. That song, we had an executive meeting at a high level industrial place where we want our music to be. I'm not looking at music industry as the necessary vessel. That's fine. We're going to do that. You know what I mean? But as far as getting your music on people's ears, video games, other partnerships with other things, you want to touch that market base. It's a bigger window than even the delivery system for music, right? Well, the people that heard our track first, that one, the Last Man Standing, and we've got a lot of really positive things. That song's just laying in the wings, waiting to hit a giant target, and we're just waiting for that industrial component to complete what it's already set in motion. But they thought we were from the UK, right? So you know what I mean? So back to that original intent. And what I met about this guy, I mean, I have compared him to Jagger. There's a bit of John Lennon about him. There's a bit of Paul McCartney about him. There's a bit, all these types of people. There's a bit of that in him. But yeah, that track essentially comes down to groove. You know what I mean? Like that song, if you hear that and all that percussion, which was his early on, Judson was like, I don't want to put layers and layers of music and, guitars and keyboards. How much percussion can we put into these things,
Well, yeah, I because, Shannon is who he is, and the touch that he has, with drums and percussion, I was like, well, let's build our production hooks, not on, lush studio tricks, but on percussive instruments.
Yeah. And we're constantly going back. I mean, for what it's worth, my right hand and his right hand, that natural thing. And then as a result, his groove with the vocal delivery and the sibilance and attack of his voice, they're like this, you know what I mean? So we put a heavy emphasis on just get that as many times as we can. If you can get that in the speaker on repeat, it's engaging.
Yeah, I've referred to that, as many points of energy.
Feel, groove,
We'll have part 2 of the Judson, McKinney, and the Wanderers interview coming up tomorrow, featuring Shannon Forrest and, of course, Judson. There are links in the description where you can get more information on Shannon and Judson McKinney and their band, all their social media. Check out their videos. Shannon is also filming from the road when he's with Toto. We're hoping to get an on-camera interview with him when he comes to Calgary on March 7th. And remember, if you want to donate to the channel, there's a PayPal link. If you want to join our newsletter, you'll get informed when we release something, because YouTube doesn't always let our 128,000 subscribers know what we're doing. Not sure why. Subscribe to our channel, share our videos, like them, and comment on them as well. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Book.